The attaché leaned in close enough to fog the brass of the buttons on Lance Corporal Aiden Crow's tunic, and he said the words loud enough for the violinists at the far end of the mirrored hall to hear them, and Crow did not blink. "Just for show," the attaché said. He said it slowly. He said it the way a man says a verdict. "Decorative furniture, a tin man with no fight in him." His junior staff, 3 of them clustered behind his right shoulder with crystal flutes in their hands, laughed the way junior men laugh when the senior man has decided what is funny. Crow's eyes did not move. The metal ribbons on his chest did not move. The white glove on the small of the rifle did not move. I was 4 paces away with the seating chart in my hand, and I felt my own face go cold. My name is Tobias Wren. I was in my 2nd year as a junior protocol officer in the household of Edenhall, and that night I was the duty floor officer for the foreign decoration ceremony in the mirrored hall, the one the household still calls the long glass for the 7 panels of beveled glass that run its east wall. 200 chairs were set in a horseshoe around the dais. A foreign cross of the 2nd class was to be pinned, in the 2nd hour, on the chests of 3 of our own retired senior officers, by the visiting delegation's head of mission. It was, in protocol terms, an ordinary evening, the kind where nothing should go wrong. It went wrong at 52 minutes past 9, in the 3rd corner of the hall, where Lance Corporal Aiden Crow of the household foot guard stood the inner door post in full ceremonial. Red tunic, brass buttons, white gloves, the tall black bearskin, the rifle at port arms, and across the left breast of his tunic the small bar of 7 metal ribbons that nobody at the reception that evening had thought to read. The attaché had been drinking for an hour. I had watched him drift, the way you watch weather move across a flat field, beginning the evening polite at the head of mission's elbow, ending it loose at the shoulders, his collar slightly turned. He had cornered a senior staffer of the household near the dessert table, and held forth for 10 minutes about the regrettable softness of ceremonial troops in capitals like ours. She had nodded at the right places and excused herself the moment a tray came past. The attaché had drifted on, with his junior staff and his glass, across the marble, until his hip was against the velvet rope of the inner cordon, and his face was within a foot of Lance Corporal Crow's, and the room had become the test that no one had asked for. "Tin man," the attaché said again. He was enjoying the sound of it. "Look at him, look at this. They stand them out like umbrella stands, they stand them out for the cameras." He turned his head a quarter back to his 3 juniors. "Take a photograph, go on. Take one for the file. We'll show the embassy what passes for a soldier in this town." The youngest junior, a man of perhaps 26 in a borrowed dinner jacket, lifted his phone. He did not quite raise it. He looked at the attaché. The attaché waved him on with the back of his hand. The phone came up. The flash went off. It caught the underside of the bearskin and the line of Crow's jaw and the row of brass buttons, and for a second the mirrored panels of the east wall threw the flash back at us in 7 places, and a few faces in the closer chairs turned to see what had popped. Crow did not turn, Crow did not look, Crow did not blink. I felt the protocol officer in me start to move. I took a step. The senior steward at my elbow, a man who had been on the floor for 32 years and who knew, before I did, exactly which line of the manual I was about to break, set his fingers very lightly on my sleeve. He did not look at me. He spoke without moving his lips. "Wait, Mr. Wren. He is photographing the inner cordon. I know what he is doing. I should wait." I waited. I will not pretend it was easy. The youngest junior was lining up a second shot. The attaché had taken half a step closer until the front of his shoes were at the line of the cordon, and he had lifted his own glass and was pretending to toast Crow with it. "To the tin man," he said, "to his medals." He squinted at the ribbons across Crow's chest. He made a small face, a man who is performing distaste. "What are these? Attendance ribbons? Parade days?" Did he stand still long enough to be given a colored bit of cloth? He leaned closer. He read the ribbons aloud, one at a time, in a sing-song voice, the way a man reads the menu in a restaurant where he has decided in advance to find fault. He did not know what he was reading. He could not, because the ribbons of our service do not announce themselves to the layman, and 3 of the 7 on Crow's chest were not parade ribbons at all. The attaché read them the way he read everything that evening, as proof of his own correctness. Crow did not move. The white glove did not shift on the rifle by a hair. The eyes stayed on the far panel of the mirrored wall, where the chandeliers threw their light. The metal bar across his chest sat exactly as it had sat when he had marched onto the post at 8 o'clock, and exactly as it would sit when he marched off at midnight. The attaché was 4 inches from his face. The juniors were laughing. The phone flashed a 3rd time. Crow did not blink. I had not before that night fully understood the thing that the regiment teaches and does not write down. The discipline of a man on the post is not the absence of reaction. It is a decision, renewed each second, not to permit the reaction. Crow was holding it. He was working harder, standing perfectly still, than the attaché was working in his entire loud body, and he was winning. It was the senior steward who saw the second man first. He saw him before I did. He saw him before the attaché did. He gave the smallest possible tilt of the head toward the south door of the hall and said, again without moving his lips, "Wait, Mr. Wren, wait, he has come in." The second man was Marshal Brigadier Lothar Vossen. He had been listed on the delegation's protocol sheet as the head of mission's military advisor. I had handed him a name card at the south door at 8:05. He was perhaps 60, narrow-shouldered, gray at the temples, in the full mess dress of his service, dark green tunic, gold cuffs, a chest of decorations of his own that I had at the door very carefully not stared at. He had been speaking with our retired Air Marshal at the punch table for the last 20 minutes. He had heard the third flash of the phone from across the room, and he had set down his glass, and he had begun to walk. He walked the way the attaché did not. He walked the way Crow stood. He walked through the crowd at the pace of a man who is not in a hurry and who is not slowing down. People moved aside for him without being asked. He came down the line of the dais. He came along the edge of the cordon. He stopped 6 feet behind the attaché. The attaché had not seen him. The attaché was still leaning at Crow, still reading the ribbons in his sing-song, still half-turned to invite his juniors into the joke. Marshal Brigadier Vossen looked not at the attaché but at Crow. He looked at Crow's face first, for perhaps 2 seconds, and his own face did not change. Then he looked at the metal bar. He looked at it slowly, ribbon by ribbon, the way a man reads a sentence he has read before but not in a long time. He stopped at the third ribbon from the left. It was small, it was thin. It was the only one of the 7 that was the color of dried blood with a single hair-fine thread of gold running through it. Vossen looked at that ribbon for the longest moment of the evening. Then he looked at Crow's face again. Then he straightened himself by half an inch, and he came to attention. I have, in 2 years, seen a great deal of attention come and go on the floor of the long glass. I had not in 2 years seen a man of Vossen's rank come to it standing 6 feet behind a member of his own delegation in the middle of a foreign reception, in mess dress, in the presence of 200 seated guests, for the door-post of the inner cordon. He came to it. His heels made one small clean sound against the marble. The attaché stopped mid-sentence. He turned his head. He saw behind him the second highest-ranking officer of his own delegation, his own military advisor, the man whose recommendation his career depended on, standing at full attention behind his right shoulder, facing the door-post. Vossen did not look at the attaché. Vossen spoke past him. He spoke to Crow. His voice carried the way the voice of a man who has commanded a field carries even in a chandeliered room. He did not raise it. He did not need to. The orchestra at the south end heard him and stopped tuning. The chairs in the horseshoe heard him and turned. "Captain Crow," he said. The word landed in the room and did not move. It was not the rank on Crow's ceremonial tunic. The rank on Crow's ceremonial tunic was Lance Corporal, because that is the rank under which he stood the household foot-guard post on the cordon of the long glass. The word Vossen had used was Crow's other rank. It was the rank he had held in a different uniform, in a different country, in a different decade, before he had taken the slow walk back into ceremonial service that men of his kind sometimes take when they decide they have done enough quiet things and would like, for the rest of their service, to stand at a door in a tall black bearskin and not be asked to do any more of them. The room understood it all at once. I watched 200 faces understand it. I watched the head of mission at the front of the horseshoe set his glass very gently on the small table beside him. I watched our retired Air Marshal, who had been speaking to Vossen at the punch table, take one small step back to give the moment air. I watched the senior steward beside me close his eyes for a long second, the way an old man closes his eyes when a thing he has hoped for a long time has finally come. Vossen spoke again. He spoke only to Crow. He spoke past the attaché the way a tide passes a stick on a beach. "I did not know," he said, "that you were here." A pause. "Forgive me, I should have known." Crow did not answer. Crow could not answer. The post does not answer. The eyes stayed on the far panel of the mirrored wall. The white glove did not move, but I will tell you what I saw. I saw, for 1/2 of 1 second, the very faintest possible motion at the corner of Crow's jaw, the kind of motion that means the man inside the discipline has accepted the address and returned it without breaking the post. Vossen saw it. Vossen had been a soldier long enough to read it. He gave one small nod. He turned then, for the first time, to the attaché. The attaché's face had gone the color of paper. His glass was still half raised. His mouth had stopped working. Behind him, his 3 junior staff had taken the smallest possible step back, the way men step back from a man who has just put his hand on a wire he did not know was live. Vossen did not raise his voice. Vossen did not need to. He said one sentence to the attaché in their own language, the language of the delegation, and I do not speak it, and I will not pretend to know what the sentence was. But I watched the attaché's face hear it. I watched the color go out of his cheeks and into the back of his neck. I watched his eyes drop from Vossen's face to the marble at Vossen's feet and stay there. The juniors heard the sentence too. 2 of them turned away at once as if they had remembered an appointment. The youngest, the one with the phone, fumbled the phone into his jacket pocket and looked at the floor. Vossen waited. He waited the way a man waits for an answer he is sure will come. The attaché, when it came, gave it without lifting his eyes. He bowed his head. He bowed it to Vossen. Then more slowly, with the small, slow effort of a man whose pride is being taken out of him 1 inch at a time in front of 200 witnesses, he turned a quarter to his right and bowed his head to Lance Corporal Aiden Crow on the door post. Crow did not acknowledge the bow. Crow could not. The post does not acknowledge bows. The eyes stayed forward. The rifle stayed at port arms. The metal bar across his chest sat exactly as it had sat the entire evening. Vossen turned. He walked at the same unhurried pace back along the edge of the dais, back to the punch table, back to our retired air marshal, and took up the conversation he had left. He did not look back at the attaché. He did not look back at Crow. He had said what he had come to say, and he had said it in the only words that mattered. The attaché stood for perhaps 10 more seconds at the cordon. His glass came down. His shoulders came down with it. He set the glass on the small table at the edge of the cordon. He turned very carefully, and he walked toward the south door of the hall, and his 3 junior staff fell in behind him without a word, the way the staff of a finished man fall in. They went out through the south door. They did not come back to the reception. I learned the next morning that the attaché had requested before midnight to be recalled. I learned 3 weeks later that the recall had been granted, and that he had been quietly reassigned to a desk post in the foreign ministry of his own country, where he would not, the gentle phrase had it, be required to attend any further ceremonial functions abroad. The reception resumed. The orchestra picked up. The head of mission came forward to the dais at the hour and pinned the foreign cross on 3 of our retired senior officers, and gave a graceful speech in our language, and was applauded warmly. Marshal Brigadier Vossen stood with the head of mission's party throughout, faultless and erect, and did not again glance toward the doorpost. He had said what he had to say. Lance Corporal Aiden Crow stood his post until midnight. He marched off it at the change. His relief came on. He carried his rifle through the south corridor at the standard pace. He did not speak to me when he passed. He did not speak to the senior steward. He went down the back stair to the duty room, set his bearskin on the shelf, and unbuckled his belt. I went down later because I wanted to. I had no business to put to him. I stood in the door of the duty room for perhaps a minute before he noticed me. He was sitting on the bench in shirt sleeves with his tunic folded across his knees. The metal bar lay on the bench beside him. He was not looking at it. He was looking at his hands. "Captain Crow," I said it quietly. He looked up. He smiled very slightly. "Lance Corporal Crow," he said. "Lance Corporal is the rank of the post, Mr. Wren. The other one is somebody else's business." He recognized the 3rd ribbon. He did. What was it? He thought for a moment. He picked up the metal bar in his hand. He looked at the small thin ribbon, dark red with the hair of gold through it. He turned it once in his fingers. He set it back on the bench. "It was a long time ago," he said, "and a different uniform, and the Marshal Brigadier's people were the ones we went in to get out. That was all." He stood up. He pulled the shirt sleeves down. He picked up his coat. He looked at me one more time, and the smile, very small, came back to the corner of his mouth and went again. He could have said anything, Crow said. He could have made a speech. He could have brought the whole room to its feet. He came to attention. That was kind of him. That was more than I needed. He walked past me, out the door of the duty room, and into the back corridor and up the stair, and out into the night. I went back up to the long glass. The reception was wrapping. The chairs were being folded. The chandeliers were being raised. The senior steward stood at the south door with his hands behind his back, watching the room empty, and as I came past him he nodded once, the smallest possible nod, the kind a senior man gives a junior man when he is saying, without using a word, "You held the line." I held it because he held it. The post had not moved. The line had not moved. A man with a glass and a phone and a sneering mouth had come to the cordon and found, in the 7 small ribbons across the chest of the man he had called a tin man, the entire weight of a service he had not earned the right to read. The medals had answered him. They had answered him better than a fist would have, or a shout, or a single sentence from a senior officer of our own house. They had answered him in the only voice the post is permitted to use, which is no voice at all, and the room had heard them, and the attaché had heard them, and the attaché had walked out into the night with the sound of them in his ears, and a recall on his desk by morning. Lance Corporal Aidan Crow stood the post the next evening, and the evening after, with the same 7 small ribbons across his chest, and the same white gloves on the small of the rifle, and the same eyes on the far panel of the mirrored wall, and he never spoke a word about any of it. The post does not speak. The medals had spoken for him. The room had listened. That was enough.